Hi, my name is Dr. Anna Baranowsky, and I'm very delighted to be speaking with Thomas Hubl, who is a contemporary spiritual teacher, and he's got a particular focus on the use of spiritual or mystical growth to heal individual and collective trauma. Completely something that we need to be talking about right now, where trauma can be embedded in so many generations. And I know you're also working on some very interesting projects, the power of we, using communication as a route for personal growth and healing, mystical principles of healing, like really drawing in an awareness that, healing comes from deeper layers of essence, things that we're not fully aware of, or either not aware of or not really taking advantage of. And then the Pocket Project, which is very interesting to address collective or generational healing after trauma. So I'm grateful to be speaking with you today, Thomas, and I wonder if you might just start by helping me to understand what is spirituality anyways?
So first of all, thank you for having me in this conversation with you. So thank you very much. I'm also happy that we have this exchange. And it seems first of all that we have a similar passion in looking at the deep aspects of trauma and how can we make a meaningful difference in the world in terms of healing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think spirituality is a kind of a word that has many different definitions. For me, it means that we live a lifestyle where we make God or the creative principle or the awakened consciousness or like the inherent essence of life our priority, and we devote our life to really serve the essence of life. And so if we look at that, it comes with certain kind of qualities that start to flower in people. It comes with presence, it comes with a deeper inner alignment, it comes with a natural sense of ethics, it comes with a conscious participation in the creative process, and it comes with the fact that that we are more and more awakening out of or transcending our regular identifications with structures in consciousness in order to be more free. I often say that unconscious energy is destiny and conscious energy is a possibility. So it means if I don't know what drives me, it seems like things happen to me and I'm just kind of trying to cope with it. But the more and more I wake up and the more and more I become aware of my shadows, of traumas, also of my conditioning, so more and more I will have a choice. I will have the freedom to participate out of creativity in life. And I think, that's a much bigger question, but given the time that we have, I think that's a short definition.
So I wonder if you would help me to understand your version of how communication, or what you call the power of we, helps people with healing, both from an individual and a community level.
Yes. So first of all, we take communication in our spiritual practice. One aspect of it is to take communication and say, okay, communication is like playing music. We can play music like an amateur, or we can play music like a professional. So if we take communication, there's so much information that's being communicated between two people or within a group context. So when we take the spiritual practice of presence, of spiritual alignment, of a high level of attunement, and we apply it to our communication processes, we see, wow, actually a human being radiates an enormous amount of information every moment into the space. And if I am a receiver and I am tuned enough and present enough to receive that information, so I become a much more refined tool or instrument in the communication process. And I think that's, first of all, very valid for everybody who works with people, but that's actually valid for anybody because we are all in relationship with life, with people, with in our companies or workplaces. So I think that's a great practice that we can apply so many moments of our life. And the other thing is that I believe that a we space and a more and more synchronized and present we space is actually an enormous healing tool. Because if we say that trauma most of the time is a result out of kind of an inappropriate relation, so then the healing of trauma is kind of the restoration of the relation in order to bring back the part of life that has been split off, that has been kind of suppressed or held back or frozen, so that the relational capacities of us human beings are actually enormous healing. I mean, every therapist knows that, but if we combine the mystical dimension, the subtle energy dimension, and the component, and we bring them together, I think we have an enormously powerful tool in the healing work, in the trauma integration, but also simply in the way how we create social architecture. So we spaces are actually very high-level, intelligent spaces. I think that we can still explore much, much more, yes.
Because with trauma, and especially if there's a very human element to the trauma, people tend to hide from others.
Right.
So the possibility of having communication that is more deliberate, intentional, and focused on that place that you described before, where, you know, people come from an essential orientation where the focus is making sure that they're aligned with something of a higher, something that's a higher vibration or more correct. How difficult is it for you to train people to stay in that place so that they could once again begin to connect with people in a way that is safe and, you know, aligned with, I guess, our highest purpose in life?
Right. So what I have seen is it's a process, and it's because the parts in us that are healthy and integrated, so there it's easy for us to be present, to be attuned, to be compassionate, to care, to feel for others. But we see that then my shadows and your shadows, my trauma and your trauma, when they overshadow each other, so then we are sitting in what we call unclarity, in confusion, in not being able to resolve conflicts, in challenging relational setups. And so therefore, what I've seen is in the training of the deeper like presence and attunement, the healing is a necessary aspect. So once I start to train, I will see, wow, I need to integrate my shadows as an inherent aspect of my training. So then life heals, and when life heals, our life base gets more healthy. And if the life base is more healthy, we are naturally much more an integral part of life. And I agree very much with you when you say that the one aspect of trauma is isolation. So what we actually train is that we bring back the parts and the aspects of us that are more isolated in order to participate in the collective intelligence. So the whole system is actually also getting more intelligent by every one of us working through our stuff and also developing through that much higher capacities to relate. And I think that again is the prerequisite for the understanding of collective trauma dynamics that are like enormous pockets of unconscious energy. I often say that our cities are built upon a dark lake. And as long as we don't open the door, we don't see that actually the city is built on dark water, like unconscious water. But actually, there's a lot of material that dwells in our nervous systems, in our cultural agreements, that is crucial, but is hidden. So as long as we don't put the flashlight of consciousness onto it, it stays hidden. But in the moment we put the flashlight there, we see, oh my God, there's an enormous dimension of us as a culture that maybe many people are not putting either at all awareness on or not enough. I think that's a huge finding. I think with that we need to explore.
Well, I think, you're tapping into something that I think, as a culture, a Western culture, the whole focus is don't look at the shadow, don't look at that dark lake. Instead, buy a lot of stuff and distract yourself constantly, because to sit with that content and to make space to show up for your own storyline, it's completely not acceptable. It's not the zeitgeist of this generation. This is the opposite of what we are being trained to do. We are being trained to hide the shadow. Now, can you talk a little bit more about the shadow? Because I think that is a concept that people do not really understand.
Yes, first of all, I agree with you that there is a lot of kind of attention on entertainment, and entertainment is a part that takes us away, especially when it becomes uncomfortable. And the nature of the shadow is that the uncomfortable parts in our development, the overwhelming parts, are that our inner kind of regulation is to suppress them or to try to get them out of the way in order to keep functioning. But later on, those kind of fragmented parts or the split of parts will ask to come back, and they will constantly ask to come back because that's healing. So our system naturally wants to heal, and so that the shadow is in our culture often seen as weaknesses, and I think we need a radical reframing of weaknesses, because it means when as a child I was able to suppress a pain that was actually too overwhelming for my further development to continue, and I split it off, I did that out of intelligence, not out of stupidity. Mm-hmm. And the fact, so in everything in our life, when something doesn't work, we actually have to ask the question, but what works that it doesn't work? So, and if somebody is shy and is not coming out, most probably it has a good reason why that's the case. And if I try to push myself, instead of really accepting that something works when I feel shy or held back or not as powerful as I see other people being. And so then I think the reframing is that our intelligence and our creativity was working in those moments. And I think that's a very helpful way to re-own the shadow parts and say, wow, that's not an it, but that's an active part of me, but is me participating in suppressing something through contracting my muscles. And that's a whole different notion. And I think, as you said, that if we create a culture where we become much more kind of aware and put much more attention onto that which is difficult and uncomfortable, we actually create a culture that is much more whole, and it gives us the freedom to walk on the left and on the right side of the street, not just on one side of the street, because I cannot walk on the other side because it's too dark. And I think that gives a human being freedom, joy, vitality, life energy, clarity, groundedness, the capacity to relate. So there are many, many beautiful aspects that I think from a healthy shadow integration process. Yeah.
I understand this is so important in terms of the reality that our personalities are informed by what we are exposed to as young children, and as a form of intelligence, we will form personalities to keep ourselves safe or to cope with what we're exposed to as a child, and then the past pours into the present as a result of what we've been exposed to as children, and the ignitions of the present moment and how they ignite us to use those old resources and tools. Now, I think that when we have a holding unit, when our life has been created with people and systems around us that allow us to support the transformation, the integration of that dark lake or the shadow that you're talking about, yeah, of course, then we could move into this beautiful essence and the focus of really dedicating our lives to the truth of awakening, or becoming truly who we're meant to be on this planet. And yet, without that holding, when the collective organism of the society around us is giving us one message, when I see my clients, and I consider them unbelievably courageous because they're coming in, and because I do trauma work, they're coming in to look at that piece. When they come in and they do that deeper work, I see nothing but courage. But when I do the work and then I send them back into certain environments, the environments themselves undermine and again ask them to go back and cover that up again.
Right.
So that is a big thing that individuals who are trying to uncover these pieces have to cope with.
Right. I think you are describing something very important, that the power that in the Jewish mysticism there's a beautiful saying that says one of the few things that you can do for your awakening is to create a context around you that supports the highest that you want to support in yourself. And that means that if we have a context around us, if a healing context, a spiritual practice context, but actually every scientific community, every sports team creates a microculture that supports the quality that we want to cultivate. And so the fact that in a culture often, especially when it's about collective traumatization, is that we have been born into a context that programmed us. So we all carry the cultural context in our neuronal networks. So we carry it in our DNA. We carry it in our behaviors, in our thoughts, because so much of what we think, feel, how our body feels to us is actually programmed by thousands and thousands of years of evolution. And so therefore what you're saying is so crucial, that we need to create environments that are supportive of what we do in order to stabilize the new steps and help them to be embodied. And once they are embodied, it's great. But in the time when they are fragile plants or seeds that are sprouting and they need cultivation, they need holding, as you said, they need a kind of a growth phase. And this is true for higher consciousness insights, as it is true for the rewriting of our interior landscape and the integration of trauma. And therefore I think that the collective trauma work is also so key, because in a collectively traumatized culture, most of the people look through the same kind of distortion in the windshield, the same filters, the same feelings that we don't want to feel. So we reinforce it in each other. And we need to grow pockets of kind of health and integration. And therefore I think what you said earlier, that the we spaces are so important, because a healthy we space helps us to stabilize our healing, our growth, until it's ripe enough to appear in society in a stable way. I think you're pointing to something very, very important.
And what you're saying hooks right into this final piece, which is the pocket project that you're working on, and this idea that on a collective level, you've been bringing groups together for a number of years in which you deal with the underlying collective trauma that just brings itself to the surface. And I think that you started that in Germany, and you found out some very unexpected things in your group processes. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So what I found out, that actually how I came to this, was that I witnessed in many groups, like 12, 14 years ago, mainly in Germany, I witnessed from a certain intimacy and synchronization in a group, a kind of an eruption of collective material. And then it happened in the next group again, but just with 100 different people. And then again, and then I thought, wow, there's a pattern emerging. There's something that we need to explore. And then we did large scale group processes. So the last one was with 1,000 people in the Berlin University around the Holocaust. I got more and more interested, just in a way by accident, when I saw these processes unfold. And in the meanwhile, that I gave it a lot of thought, a lot of kind of empiric research, a lot of exploration. I did it with lots of groups. I thought, it's great. We need to create an organization that collective trauma needs to be something that's much more in our awareness, that many more people around the planet need to give their competence to, their thoughts, their kind of creativity in order to find out more about it. So that's how we started the Pocket Project, a non-profit organization where we really want to make collective trauma a topic that is in the media, that is in many people's awareness, where pockets around the world will research the specificity of local voices, how we call them, in the different countries. So what's the specificity in Israel, in Germany, in South Africa, in the United States, in Canada, in India? In many places around the world, we find scars in the tissue of life. And I think that there is so much to learn about health, about economy, about social dynamics, about politics, about many other things that are actually, as you are a specialist, you know how to detect trauma symptoms in your patients and clients, and you know how not to take the symptoms for real, but to see them as symptoms. And I think we are more and more people like yourself are specialists in doing that and can help other people to see their symptoms and go to the deeper source. But I believe we need that same capacity not to take social, economical, political, and other symptoms as for real, but to see them as symptoms of much deeper underlying traumatization. And I think that's a very exciting work to do, and I find many people around the world that are somehow on fire when they hear collective trauma work, and I think that's also what brought us together. And therefore I'm so happy about this conversation and about kind of a further collaboration.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because I see that the potential for deeper healing can happen only when there's a holding. Because if I do this deep work, I do a lot of very deep trauma work, and I love my work, but I want to send people home to a holding that can support that growth in a way where there's a deep intelligence and an understanding that we don't just cover over the shadow again. Because it's uncomfortable, but we learn how to stretch in ways that allow us to hold those shadows so that they can come into the light in a way that is nourishing and allows us to evolve as a human species, that we don't have to keep going back to violence as the answer, that we can be nourished by things that actually nourish.
Absolutely, and we don't need to repeat the patterns that we repeated already. And as you know, like trauma, as long as we don't resolve it, it's most likely to create another trauma cycle. And if we see that, we saw this thousands of years in humanity, we repeat the same things, the same wars, the same atrocities. And I think once for all, it's time to really restore that cycle and to come to a new form of living together. And I think it's possible, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to really come to a collective restoration. And how beautiful would it be if one day different leaders of different countries were to say sorry kind of to other groups and other nations and other parts of the world, where that to say sorry will be a natural need in order to restore the relation and to come to a deeper kind of collaboration in the world. And I think that's where we can, as you said, where we can come to a much more nourishing, collaborative way of living together. But that's from now to there's a lot of work to be done. We cannot just say, okay, so let's forget the past and let's get over it and let's do it. Those tendencies, they are so deeply ingrained in our being, they really need to be looked at and brought into the life so that we really can grow, and from destiny become a possibility for something new. Yeah.
Right. What a beautiful idea that we can actually evolve in this way as a species and bring ourselves more to where we need to be evolved really in the most significant ways. So Thomas, I really am just so delighted with our conversation, and thank you so very much for the insights that you've offered today, and it's a real gift to be able to speak with you.
Oh, likewise. I think we could have a much longer conversation, but thank you so much for this one.
Just to recap, this is Dr. Anna Baranowsky, and I'm speaking with Thomas Hubl, contemporary spiritual teacher, with his very specific focus on the power of we, a route to healing, personal growth in community and individually, using the mystical principles of healing and recognizing that there's an essential source that we can get access to that we need at this time to evolve as a species, uncovering our shadow material. And this can be done using the Pocket Project work as a mechanism for collective and generational trauma, looking at epigenetics and everything else. And I just want to thank you again, Thomas. This has been really, truly a wonderful conversation, and wishing all of you a gentle day.
For more Ask Dr. Anna videos and information about post-traumatic growth and recovery, subscribe and like our YouTube videos at What is PTSD, or join us at previous video episodes in our playlist Ask Dr. Anna from the Traumatology Institute team.